So, Diamond, let's talk a little bit about helping seniors with solutions regarding purchasing real estate, financing real estate, creating cash flow, and those kinds of things. What are you seeing the challenges that senior home buyers or home sellers are facing in the St. Louis area?
I think, like the rest of the population or demographic of people that are looking, is just inventory and finding that right house. But I think it's also the pricing. So I spoke with a mature seller today that was looking to sell her home, and she's looking for her next spot, which she's finding that most of the homes that she's seen, the condos that she would like to, you know, um, purchase are out of her budget. And so, yeah, it's kind of it's kind of the same across the board.
Okay. And a lot of people may not be aware that if you are 62 years of age or older, you can purchase your new home with, anywhere from 50 to 60% down. And then as long as you make the tax payments, insurance payments, any HOA payments, live in the house and keep it maintained, you can live there for the rest of your life with no mortgage payment on a monthly basis. So in a situation like that, when, they might be able to net 60 to 70% of what the new house would go for, they could get into that house and, still not have a monthly mortgage payment on it.
Yeah. And so, honestly, that's what I was sharing with her. I said, "Hey, have you considered reverse mortgage?" Because she did indicate that she'd probably have about 100,000, of cash, and she's just like, but the houses and the condos that she was looking at was running about 179, and so it was out of her budget from a cash standpoint. And I think, those that are, selling and they're able to walk away with some of the equity that they've built over the years, that could be a challenge. But I think the reverse mortgage can create a solution for the population of people, like you said, that are over 62, that may be working with a little bit of cash, to be able to move forward with something and just not aware of what their options are.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned the options because, I'm a firm believer that there's no one loan or one program that is right for every single person. That's why, when you're talking with someone, you're doing a consultation, trying to understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. The same thing for me. We're not going to steer someone into, one particular loan program or another, that isn't in their best interest. But I think a lot of times when people hear the term reverse mortgage, they're kind of triggered like, oh, this is something that, you know, has a bad connotation because of how they've been done in the past. A lot of what people think about reverse mortgages are really along the lines of, regular mortgages back before 2008 when, before we had the qualified mortgage. And there were a lot of crazy things that were out there that, that we can't do on the a regular mortgage side anymore. And there's been a lot of updates to that reverse mortgage where a lot of the problems that it had in the past have been addressed. So they really can't, be in a bind like maybe some people they heard about in the past.
Right. And I think, I mean, to your point, it's just a lack of education. People just don't know. And they don't know what it means for their family. If they do have family that, they are still, considering, for when they transition from this place. They're concerned. A lot of people are concerned about what happens to the property, because to your point earlier, it's like, if you live in the home and if you're, doing these other things, what happens to the property when they transition? And I think that is important to be able to communicate and, help people to understand, like, what does that look like?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of options. And, I'm not an estate planner. So I'm not going to give detailed estate planning advice, but there is a way to to structure your estate, maybe with the purchase of the house, with some life insurance and things like that combined, where, when you do pass away, then your heirs would get all of the money that they would have gotten anyway. Uh, but the beauty of the reverse mortgage is, for the most part, most of the reverse mortgages that are done are backed by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're an FHA product. If for some reason you owed more on the house than what it was worth, then, when you pass away, your heirs, are not responsible for the difference. If your heirs want to buy the house, they can buy it at 95% of what the house is worth, so they don't have to come up with extra money. But in the case of, which usually happens, if the house is not worth, it is worth more than what is owed on the reverse mortgage, it functions just like a regular mortgage. You sell the house, you pay off the mortgage, whatever is left goes to the estate. So, really, if you understand how the regular mortgage works, you understand about 90% of the reverse mortgage, or maybe more. And, but yeah, that's a lot of times people are wondering, well, if I do the reverse mortgage, I'm going to lose my house, or, it's going to affect my estate. And it really doesn't, because, there's protections on the downside if you owe more than what it's worth when you pass away. And then if the house is worth more than what you owe when you pass away, all, what's left over goes to your estate.
Yeah, I think that's important, for people to be aware of, and those timelines,
Hmm.
that are associated with how long do they have to act on, whatever they decide to do versus a traditional mortgage. If people were just making the payments, there's usually no rippling effects, if you will. But with a reverse mortgage, it seems like that is like one thing that they have to consider is like you have to be making a decision within a certain time period.
Right, right. And anytime you have a mortgage product on, or a mortgage on your house, if you have a loved one that has a mortgage on their house and they pass away, you want to be communicative to the servicer who's ever collecting the payments, because they'll generally work with you if they have a regular mortgage on there. And then with the reverse side, you do have 6 months to make a decision on that. And if you need additional time, they work with you on that as well. So, it's, it's one of those things where, you know, everybody has been touched with, having a loved one pass away. So everybody is very, sympathetic to everybody else, as long as you're communicative and letting them know what's going on. So, yeah. And like I said, I think that, there are a lot of people that could benefit from at least having a conversation around the reverse mortgage, or what I call the equity conversion mortgage, where, you're you're creating cash flow, you're, able to, age in place. You might have a senior that, I think like the one you're talking about now, that probably wants to get into, a condo because it's maintenance free, and, they're not going to have to shovel snow. They're not going to have to take care of yard work. They're not going to have to do any of those kinds of things. And it can make a you know, great plan for someone like that, where they can, go from something that's not really working for them to something that does, and, and do it in a way that, gives them enough cash flow on a monthly basis so that they can, have their groceries, their medicine, whatever else they need to do, maybe even afford, if they want to have some, a home health nurse come in occasionally to help them out with things. You can certainly do that.
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely that's what I'm seeing is that a lot of the seniors are wanting to leave the responsibility of, their home, but they are accustomed or are at a place of ownership to where they're like they don't necessarily want to rent a place. They want to
Right, right.
purchase. And so it seems that the condos, the villas, those are more appealing to someone that is 62 or above that is considering, still making home ownership part of their years to come, and they're not looking for, something to rent. They're wanting to buy something, and so being able to get in that game, I think the reverse mortgage has been a clear answer for them, for
Yeah,
sure.
100%, 100%. Well, yeah, I think that it's a great option. I think that it's something that people are not talking about enough, and so I'm glad we had a chance today to hop on this short podcast episode and talk through it here.
Yeah, of course. I'm all about providing solutions for people, and when it seems like there's not a way, we can, creatively come up with a way. And I think this is definitely an option that people can consider when they're looking to buy a home in their latter years.
Love it. I love it. Well, Diamond, thank you so much.
As always, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate you having me on.
Yep. Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much.